The wheelchair settled into position beside the pristine white tablecloth, and Lee Min-jae's knuckles blanched as he gripped the stem of his wineglass for the 42nd minute. No text, no call, just the suffocating reality of being abandoned like discarded trash. The other diners in the upscale restaurant practiced their studied indifference, but he felt their sidelong glances like acid on an open wound. The formidable Lee Min-jae, godfather of the Blood Oath organization, diminished to a pathetic figure waiting for a woman who would never arrive, a specter haunting his own humiliation. He was reaching for the chrome wheel of his chair when the main doors swept open, and she entered, rich brown skin catching the amber glow of the chandeliers, her natural hair pulled back in an efficient ponytail, a small girl's hand tucked protectively in hers. The child's curious gaze found him instantly, and before her mother could react, she was pulling free and approaching his table with the bold innocence only children dare to possess. "Why are you sitting all alone, mister?" the little girl asked, her head tilting with genuine concern. The woman's sharp intake of breath followed half a heartbeat later as she rushed forward, apologies already forming, but Lee Min-jae couldn't tear his eyes from her face, exhausted but warm, guarded but kind, and remarkably, utterly unintimidated by the man whose name made grown criminals flinch. Sandra Peterson had exactly dollar transcript in her checking account, and $89 in tips folded in her apron pocket, a reality she refused to dwell on as she pushed through the brass doors of the Meridian with her 7-year-old daughter's hand warm and trusting in hers. The interview at the catering company 3 blocks away had been promising, or at least that's what she told herself, but "we'll be in touch" usually meant radio silence. Still, she'd promised her daughter they'd celebrate her good behavior with dessert at the fancy restaurant where Sandra worked the dinner shift, and Sandra Peterson never broke promises to her baby girl, even when keeping them meant choosing between groceries and the electric bill. The restaurant smelled like aged wine and rosemary, luxurious and foreign compared to their cramped studio apartment they'd just left. Sandra scanned the dining room with practiced efficiency, a business couple negotiating over appetizers, an elderly foursome lingering over coffee, and a man in a wheelchair positioned near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his profile sharp and striking in the late afternoon light filtering through the glass, tattoos visible at his collar despite the expensive white dress shirt. "Mama, can I get the chocolate torte? The one with the gold leaf?" Her daughter tugged her hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "We'll see, baby," Sandra murmured, her attention catching on the untouched place setting across from the man, the empty chair that seemed to radiate rejection, and the expression on his face devastating and all too familiar, the look of someone abandoned and trying desperately not to show it. Sandra caught him the next evening during the lull between the early and late dinner services, her daughter conspicuously absent, her expression professionally apologetic in a way that made Lee Min-jae's jaw tighten with unexpected irritation. She approached his usual table near the windows he'd returned, though he couldn't articulate why, with her server's posture perfect, hands clasped in front of her apron. "Mr. Lee, I wanted to apologize for yesterday. My daughter shouldn't have bothered you like that. It was inappropriate, and I—" "Stop." The single word cut through her rehearsed speech like a blade through silk. He set down his wineglass with deliberate care, his dark eyes lifting to meet hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your daughter wasn't rude. She was honest. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Sandra's carefully constructed composure faltered. She opened her mouth, closed it, and he saw something flicker across her face, confusion mixed with cautious curiosity. She saw a man alone and asked why. He continued, his voice low enough that the neighboring tables couldn't eavesdrop. "No calculation, no fear, no pretense. That doesn't happen to me, ever." He paused, studying her with the same calculated assessment he used on potential business associates. Except he found himself cataloging different things. The exhaustion shadowed beneath her eyes, the worn edges of her work shoes, the way her spine stayed rigid despite obvious fatigue. "You raised her to have courage and compassion. That requires strength most people don't possess." The words seemed to strike something deep inside her because her professional mask cracked just enough for him to glimpse the woman underneath, fierce, protective, running on fumes and sheer determination. Sandra's voice came out rougher than she intended. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say. I'm not kind." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small business card, matte black with silver embossing. "But I am observant, and I recognize value when I see it. Is your daughter here tonight?" The question clearly caught her off guard. "She's with my neighbor. Why?" Lee Min-jae's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because I promised myself if I saw you again, I'd offer her that chocolate torte she was eyeing. Bring her tomorrow, 6 o'clock, my treat. Mr. Lee, we can't possibly. You can. You will. He slid the business card across the white tablecloth with 2 fingers, the gesture somehow both casual and commanding. And when you come, we'll discuss an opportunity that might interest you. A position, one that pays considerably more than waiting tables. His eyes held hers, and she saw something unexpected in their depths, not pity, but recognition, like he understood exactly what it meant to fight while the world watched you struggle. Call the number on that card before 5 tomorrow. Confirm you're coming. If you don't, I'll assume you're not interested, and I won't ask again. Sandra stared at the card like it might bite her, then slowly reached out and took it, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. What kind of position? The kind that solves problems, he said simply. Including yours. 6 o'clock, Sandra. Don't be late. He knew her name. She hadn't told him her name. 3 weeks passed before Sandra touched the black business card again. It had lived in her apron pocket through countless shifts, growing soft at the edges from her nervous habit of running her thumb across the embossed silver lettering. She'd brought her daughter to that dinner. How could she refuse after seeing the hope light up those young eyes, and watched Lee Min-jae treat them both with a careful courtesy that felt more dangerous than kindness? He'd asked questions. Simple ones. About her daughter's school, her favorite subjects, what she wanted to be when she grew up. He'd listened with the focused attention of someone conducting an interrogation, except his eyes had been warm, almost gentle. Then he'd slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a job offer typed on heavy cardstock. Personal assistant, salary that made her head spin, benefits that included private healthcare and education stipends. She'd taken it home, read it 17 times, and never called the number. She couldn't afford to enter his world. Men like Lee Min-jae didn't offer salvation, they offered transactions, and the cost always came due eventually. But the universe had a vicious sense of timing. Sandra was halfway through her Thursday evening shift when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. Her neighbor's panicked voice crackled through. Her daughter had fallen at the playground. Possible broken arm. Ambulance called. The emergency room visit turned into x-rays, which turned into a consultation with an orthopedic surgeon, which turned into a bill that landed in her trembling hands like a death sentence. $8,462. She had $891 in savings. No insurance that covered this. No family to call. No options except payment plans that would strangle her budget for the next 5 years, assuming they'd even approve her. Sandra sat in the hospital corridor with her sleeping daughter's head in her lap, the little girl's arm now casted and cradled carefully, and pulled out the business card with hands that had finally stopped shaking from adrenaline. The embossed letters caught the fluorescent lighting. Lee Min-jae, private line. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen for a full minute before she typed the message. This is Sandra Peterson. Is your offer still available? The response came in less than 30 seconds. Yes. My driver will collect you tomorrow. 10 a.m., bring your daughter, we'll talk. Sandra closed her eyes and felt the weight of the decision settle into her bones like stones sinking in deep water. She'd been drowning for years, working herself to exhaustion and still falling behind. Maybe it was time to stop fighting the current and see where it carried her. Even if the man offering the lifeline was the most dangerous person she'd ever met. Her phone buzzed again. The medical bill has been handled. Consider it a signing bonus. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at the invoice still clutched in her other hand, then back at the message on her screen. He'd known. Somehow, impossibly, he'd known exactly when she'd break. The black town car idled outside her apartment building at exactly 10 a.m., sleek and out of place among the rusted sedans and dented pickup trucks that lined the cracked pavement. Sandra watched it from her third-floor window, her daughter pressed against her side, the girl's casted arm cradled protectively. The driver stepped out, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, who moved with the controlled efficiency of someone trained for violence, and opened the rear door. Lee Min-jae didn't emerge. Instead, his voice carried up through the morning air, calm and unmistakable. Sandra, we can talk here, or you can come down. Your choice. She felt her daughter's curious gaze on her face, those innocent eyes that trusted her to make the right decisions, to keep them safe, to somehow make their broken life whole again. Sandra kissed the top of her head and murmured for her to stay inside with Mrs. Chen next door, then descended the narrow stairwell with legs that felt like lead. He was waiting at the bottom, his wheelchair positioned near the building's entrance where the morning light cut harsh shadows across his face. Up close, in the unforgiving daylight, she could see the full extent of the tattoos that crawled up his neck, intricate patterns that probably meant something deadly in his world. His white shirt was crisp despite the humidity, his dark slacks perfectly tailored, even seated. He looked like he'd been carved from expensive marble and dropped into her neighborhood like a beautiful, dangerous artifact. "You look exhausted," he said without preamble, his eyes tracking the dark circles beneath hers, the way her hands twisted together. "When did you last sleep a full night?" The question was so unexpected, so intimate, that Sandra's defenses cracked. "I don't remember. Honest." He nodded once, as if she'd passed some test. "Let me be equally honest with you. I know about the medical bill, $8,462. I know about the $1,700 you owe in back rent. I know about the credit card debt that's climbing toward $11,000. And I know your car needs a transmission repair you can't afford." His voice remained conversational, almost gentle, but each revelation felt like a scalpel peeling back her skin. "I know you work 60-hour weeks and still can't cover your daughter's school expenses. I know her school is 3 blocks from a neighborhood with an active gang presence. And I know you walk her there every morning because you can't trust anyone else to keep her safe." Sandra's breath had gone shallow, her vision tunneling. "How? Does it matter?" He leaned forward slightly, his hands folded in his lap with deceptive calm. "What matters is this. I'm offering you a way out. Personal assistant position, $100,000 annual salary, full benefits that include private health care with no deductibles, education stipend for your daughter that covers private school tuition, and a housing allowance that will get you both out of this building and into somewhere safe." He paused, letting the numbers sink in like anchors. "The work is legitimate, managing my schedule, handling correspondence, organizing meetings. You'll see things most people don't see, hear things most people shouldn't hear, but you'll never be asked to participate in anything illegal." "Why me?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Because you have something I need more than fear or loyalty." His dark eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. "You have integrity that hasn't been broken by desperation, yet." He glanced up at her window, where she knew her daughter was probably watching despite instructions. "I need an answer by 6 o'clock tonight. After that, the offer expires, and we both go back to our separate worlds. Think carefully, Sandra. Some lifelines only get thrown once." Sandra's first meeting took place in a private room at an upscale hotel, the kind of space designed for corporate negotiations, but repurposed for something far more dangerous. She'd spent her first week learning Min-jae's systems, his scheduling preferences, his encrypted communication protocols, the careful language he used to discuss business that sounded legitimate on the surface but carried weights and measures she was learning to decode. He'd kept his word about keeping things legal from her perspective, but she wasn't naive enough to think the men filing into this room were discussing anything innocent. She stood behind Min-jae's wheelchair, tablet in hand, spine straight in her new professional attire, a charcoal suit that actually fit properly, purchased with the advance he'd insisted she take. 6 men entered, all Korean, all dressed in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the violence coiled beneath their polished exteriors. They bowed to Min-jae with varying degrees of respect, but their eyes tracked to her with undisguised curiosity and, in some cases, contempt. The meeting began in English, but Sandra noticed how it kept slipping into rapid Korean, the words flowing too fast for her to catch more than fragments. Min-jae translated when necessary, his voice calm and authoritative as he discussed shipment schedules and distribution networks that she carefully didn't think too hard about. Then one man spoke, younger than the others, his suit more ostentatious, his posture radiating arrogance. Park Min-ho. She'd seen his name on Min-jae's calendar flagged with a small red notation that meant potential problem. Min-ho leaned back in his chair, his gaze sliding over Sandra with barely concealed disdain, and said something in Korean that made 2 of the other men shift uncomfortably. The words were directed at Min-jae, but the sneering tone and the dismissive gesture toward her made the intent crystal clear. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Min-jae went utterly still, and Sandra recognized that stillness now. It was the same predatory calm she'd seen when he'd cornered her outside her apartment, except now it carried the weight of genuine threat. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost conversational, but every syllable landed like a blade. "Repeat that." "In English, so my associate can understand exactly what you just said about her." Min-ho's smirk faltered. "I was merely suggesting that your assistant seems decorative rather than functional. Perhaps your judgment has been compromised by what? Min-jae's interruption was surgical. Choose your next words very carefully, Minho. The room held its collective breath. Sandra's fingers tightened on her tablet, her heart hammering against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral, professional, refusing to show weakness. Minho's jaw worked, clearly recalculating. I simply question whether she understands the nature of our business. She understands everything she needs to understand. Min-jae wheeled forward slightly, closing the distance between them without ever leaving his chair, and somehow the motion carried more menace than if he'd stood and advanced. But let me clarify something for everyone in this room. Sandra Peterson is my personal assistant. She has my complete confidence and my complete protection. Any disrespect shown to her is disrespect shown to me. Any threat made toward her is a threat made toward me. His eyes locked onto Minho with lethal focus. And we all know how I respond to threats, don't we? The silence was suffocating. Minho's face had gone pale beneath his tan, and Sandra watched him swallow hard before offering a stiff bow. My apologies, Sejongnim. I spoke out of turn. Yes, you did. Min-jae didn't move, didn't blink. It won't happen again. Because if it does, we won't be having this conversation in a hotel conference room. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Only then did Min-jae lean back, his posture relaxing fractionally, and when he glanced up at Sandra, she saw something unexpected in his eyes, not just protectiveness, but a question. Are you all right? She gave him the smallest nod, and his expression shifted into something that might have been pride. 2 months into the job, Sandra had found an unexpected rhythm in Min-jae's world. She'd learned to read his silences, to anticipate his needs before he voiced them, to navigate the dangerous men who passed through his penthouse with professional courtesy that masked her constant vigilance. Her daughter was thriving in her new private school, making friends, excelling in classes that actually challenged her. They'd moved to a safe neighborhood with a doorman and functioning locks. For the first time in years, Sandra could breathe without the weight of financial ruin crushing her chest. She should have known peace never lasted. The email arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, sent to her work account from an address she didn't recognize. No subject line, no message, just an attachment that made her blood turn to ice the moment it loaded on her screen. Her daughter, leaving school. The photo was high resolution, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens that captured every detail. Her backpack with the rainbow patches, the cast still on her arm, though it was due to come off next week, the gap-toothed smile as she talked to her friend. The timestamp was from that morning, 3 hours ago. Sandra's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped her tablet. She was still staring at the image, her vision tunneling, her breath coming in short gasps, when Min-jae's voice cut through the panic. Sandra, what's wrong? She couldn't speak, couldn't move, just turned the screen toward him with nerveless fingers. The change in Min-jae was instantaneous and terrifying. The careful control he maintained, the measured calm that defined every interaction, shattered like glass. His face went rigid, something deadly and ancient rising behind his eyes as he grabbed the tablet and examined the photo. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. When, the word came out barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. This morning, 3 hours ago. Her voice cracked. Min-jae. Who? He was already scrolling, his fingers moving with furious precision across the screen. The email routing is masked, but the metadata. He went utterly still, and when he looked up, Sandra had never seen another human being radiate such cold, focused rage. Park Min-ho. The name landed between them like a grenade. Sandra's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair, her entire body trembling. My daughter. He took a picture of my daughter. He made a threat. Min-jae's voice had gone soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Against a child. Against your child. He reached for his phone, then stopped, his attention snapping back to her with laser focus. Sandra, listen to me very carefully. This is not a negotiation, and I don't have time to argue. Pack a bag. Pack 2. 1 for you, 1 for your daughter. You're moving into the penthouse tonight. I can't just... You can. You will. He was already texting someone, his fingers flying across the screen. I'm sending 2 of my people to your daughter's school right now. They'll stay with her until you can pick her up. I'm putting armed security on your apartment building until we can move your belongings. And you. He looked up at her, and the protective fury in his expression made her chest ache. You don't leave my sight until Minho is dealt with. Do you understand? Sandra opened her mouth to protest about boundaries, about keeping her daughter separate from his world, about all the conditions she'd demanded, but the words died in her throat, because the man in front of her wasn't her boss anymore. He was something more dangerous and infinitely more necessary. He was her shield. "How long?" she whispered. "As long as it takes." His hand found hers, squeezed once, fierce and steady. "No one touches your daughter. Not while I'm breathing." The penthouse transformed overnight into something between a fortress and a home. Sandra watched it happen in real-time, security personnel conducting sweeps of every room, installing additional cameras at entry points, reinforcing the already formidable locks on the private elevator. Min-jae orchestrated it all from his position near the windows, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice issuing commands with clipped precision that left no room for questions or hesitation. Her daughter arrived 2 hours later, escorted by 2 stone-faced men who'd apparently been her shadows since the moment school let out. The little girl burst through the elevator doors with her backpack bouncing, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation, her eyes going wide as she took in the sprawling penthouse. "Mama, is this where we're staying? It's like a castle." Sandra caught her in a fierce embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her warm body against her chest. Safe, unharmed, completely unaware of how close danger had come. "For a little while, baby. Mr. Lee is helping us." Min-jae had wheeled closer, and when Sandra looked up, she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression as he watched them relief. She realized, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "Your room is ready," he said quietly. "Second door on the left. It has its own bathroom, and I had some things brought over from your apartment. Books, toys, clothes." His gaze shifted to her daughter. "There's also a new tablet on the desk, for homework, and maybe some games if your mother approves." The little girl's face lit up, and she looked to Sandra with pleading eyes. Sandra managed a nod, and her daughter took off down the hallway with the resilient enthusiasm only children possessed, her cast-covered arms swinging as she ran. The silence that followed felt heavier than stone. "She doesn't know," Sandra whispered. "She has no idea what almost happened." "Good." Min-jae's voice was rough. "She should never have to know. This is my fault, Sandra. I brought you into my world, and I didn't protect you well enough. I underestimated how far Minho would go. And your daughter," his hands clenched on the armrests of his wheelchair, knuckles going white. "A child. He threatened a child to get to me." Sandra found herself moving without conscious thought, sinking to her knees beside his chair so they were eye level, her hands covering his clenched fists. "Stop. This isn't your fault. Minho made his choice. I made mine first." His dark eyes met hers, and she saw the weight of self-recrimination there, the shame that went deeper than the current crisis. "I chose to pursue you, to pull you into this life. I told myself it was because you were competent, because you had integrity, but the truth is," he exhaled shakily, "the truth is I wanted you close. From that first moment when your daughter looked at me without fear, when you looked at me without pity, I wanted." He stopped, jaw working. "I'm a selfish man, Sandra, a broken one, and I've put you and your daughter in danger because I couldn't let you go." "Broken," Sandra repeated the word softly, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. "You think you're broken because of this?" She gestured to the wheelchair. "I know I am." His voice had gone flat, matter of fact. "I can't stand, can't run, can't protect the people He cut himself off, but the unfinished sentence hung between them like a confession. "You moved us into your home within hours. You put armed guards on my daughter before I even finished processing what was happening. You're orchestrating a response that clearly terrifies Minho enough that he resorted to threatening a child." Sandra leaned closer, her hand coming up to cup his jaw, forcing him to hold her gaze. "You're not broken, Min-jae. You're the strongest man I've ever met. And somewhere along the way, between the job offer and the signing bonus and watching you defend me in that conference room, I stopped seeing you as my boss." His breath caught. "What do you see?" "Someone I trust." She paused, her heart hammering. "Someone I care about, more than I should." The admission settled between them like a struck match, small and dangerous, and capable of igniting everything. Min-jae's hand rose slowly, carefully, his fingers threading through her hair with a gentleness that belied the violence coiled in his frame. "You shouldn't," he whispered. "I'm everything you tried to keep your daughter away from. I know." Sandra's eyes didn't waver. "But you're also the reason she's safe right now. You're the reason we're both safe. So maybe I'm selfish too." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and for a moment, the formidable godfather of the Blood Oath organization was just a man holding on to something precious he didn't believe he deserved. He left before dawn on a Thursday, and Sandra woke to find only a note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. "Keep her safe. I'll handle the rest. Don't leave the penthouse." 3 days of silence followed. Sandra tried to maintain normalcy for her daughter's sake, helping with homework at the dining table, watching movies on the massive screen, exploring the penthouse like it was an adventure rather than a gilded cage. But at night, after her daughter fell asleep in the guest room surrounded by stuffed animals and new books, Sandra stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared out at the city lights, her reflection ghostly in the glass, and wondered if Min-jae was still breathing. The security team rotated shifts with military precision but offered no information beyond clipped reassurances that the situation was being handled. She caught fragments of phone conversations in Korean, tense voices discussing movements and confirmations that made her stomach clench with dread. This was the part of his world she'd been protected from: the violence, the war, the cost of power measured in blood and bodies. On the third night, at 2:17 a.m., the private elevator chimed. Sandra was off the couch before conscious thought, her heart in her throat, her body moving toward the sound. The doors slid open, and Min-jae emerged alive, whole but transformed. His white shirt was gone, replaced by a black t-shirt that showed the full extent of his tattoos. There was dried blood on his knuckles, a cut above his eyebrow that had been cleaned but not properly treated, and an exhaustion in his eyes that went bone deep. Their gazes locked, and the air between them crackled with everything unsaid. "Is it done?" Sandra's voice came out barely above a whisper. "It's done." He wheeled forward slowly, and she saw the weight of whatever he'd done in the rigid set of his shoulders, the haunted look beneath the exhaustion. Min-ho won't threaten anyone again. Neither will his organization. It's finished. Sandra closed the distance between them in 3 steps and dropped to her knees in front of his wheelchair, her hands finding his bloodied ones, not caring about the evidence of violence still marking his skin. "Are you hurt?" "No." The single word cracked on the way out. "Sandra, I need to know." I was terrified. The confession burst out of her like a dam breaking. "For 3 days, I didn't know if you were alive or dead, and I realized that somewhere between you paying my daughter's medical bills and defending me in that conference room and pulling us into your home to keep us safe, I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in it." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And if you died out there," his hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. "Stop. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that." Her fingers tightened on his. "Your world doesn't allow for promises like that. Then let me promise you this instead." He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers, his voice dropping to something raw and unguarded. "Everything I did these past 3 days, every choice I made, every line I crossed, it was for you, for her, for the family you've become to me." His breath was warm against her lips. "I went to war, Sandra, and I won, because the alternative was losing you, both of you, and I'm not strong enough to survive that. Min-jae, be mine." The words were part command, part plea. "Not as my assistant, not as someone I employ. Be mine. Let me be yours. Let me protect you and your daughter, not because I pay you, but because you're my family, the only family that matters." Sandra's breath caught, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You're asking me to choose you, fully, knowing what you are, what your life is." "Yes. No apology, no softening. I'm asking you to choose the monster who loves you more than his own life." She looked at him, this dangerous, broken, beautiful man who'd systematically dismantled every wall she'd built to survive, who'd offered her salvation and demanded nothing but honesty in return, who'd gone to war for her daughter without hesitation. "I already chose you," Sandra whispered against his mouth. "3 days ago, when you left, and I realized I'd rather have you alive and dangerous than safe and alone. I choose you, Min-jae. I choose us." When he kissed her, it tasted like promises written in blood and devotion forged in fire, the kind of love that didn't ask permission and didn't apologize for existing. The sound of small feet padding across hardwood broke through the moment like a stone through still water. Sandra pulled back first, her maternal instincts overriding everything else, her head turning toward the hallway where her daughter stood in her pajamas, backlit by the soft glow of the nightlight they'd installed in her room. "Mama?" The little girl's voice was sleep-rough and uncertain, her good hand clutching the stuffed rabbit Min-jae had bought her on the second day. "I heard voices. I got scared. I'm here, baby." Sandra was up and moving before Min-jae could respond, but his hand caught hers briefly, a silent anchor before she crossed to her daughter and gathered her close. "Everything's okay. Mr. Lee just got home." The girl's eyes tracked past Sandra to where Min-jae sat in his wheelchair, and Sandra watched her daughter's face shift through a series of expressions: relief, curiosity, and then something more complicated as she took in the scene she'd interrupted. Children saw more than adults gave them credit for, and Sandra knew her daughter had just witnessed something that changed the landscape of their small family. "You were gone a long time," the girl said to Min-jae, her tone somewhere between accusation and concern. "Mama was sad. She tried to hide it, but I could tell." Min-jae's expression softened in a way Sandra had never seen before, all the hard edges and controlled menace melting into something almost gentle. "I'm sorry I made your mother sad. I had to take care of something important. Something to keep both of you safe." The girl considered this with the gravity of someone far older than her years. Then she walked across the room, her bare feet silent on the floor, and stopped directly in front of Min-jae's wheelchair. Sandra's breath caught, every maternal instinct screaming to intervene, to protect, but she forced herself to stay still and let the moment unfold. "You love my mama," the girl said. Not a question, a statement of observed fact. Min-jae didn't flinch, didn't deflect. "Yes, very much. And you want to keep us safe, both of us. More than anything." The girl's head tilted, her expression serious in that way children became when processing something that would shape their understanding of the world. "My teacher said families are people who love each other and take care of each other. She said families come in all different shapes." Sandra's throat went tight. She could see where this was heading, could feel the question forming in the air between them like something fragile and inevitable. "Are you going to be my daddy now?" The words came out small but clear, cutting through the late-night silence with devastating precision. The question hung in the air, and Sandra watched Min-jae's face, watched him look at her daughter, really look at her, taking in the hope and fear and innocent trust in those young eyes. Then his gaze lifted to Sandra's, and she saw everything in that single glance. The question beneath the question. The understanding that this was a threshold they couldn't uncross. The desperate hope that she would allow him this. She gave him the smallest nod, tears already blurring her vision. Min-jae turned back to the little girl, and for the first time since Sandra had met him, a genuine smile crossed his face, not the dangerous curve of his lips when he made a threat, not the calculated expression when he negotiated a deal, but something real and unguarded and achingly vulnerable. "I'd like that very much," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll have me, and if your mother agrees." The girl looked back at Sandra, her eyes asking permission for something that would change everything. "Yes," Sandra whispered, her hand pressed against her mouth as tears spilled over. "Yes, baby, if this is what you want." Her daughter's face lit up with pure joy, and she threw her good arm around Min-jae's neck in a fierce hug that nearly knocked him sideways. He caught her carefully, his hands settling on her small back with a gentleness that belied the violence they'd recently committed. And when he met Sandra's eyes over their daughter's shoulder, she saw her own truth reflected back at her. They were a family now, broken and unconventional and forged in fire, but a family nonetheless. "Can I go back to bed now?" her daughter asked, pulling back with a yawn. "I'm really sleepy, Daddy." The word landed like a blessing, and Min-jae's breath caught audibly. "Of course. Sweet dreams." Sandra walked her daughter back to her room, tucked her in with whispered reassurances and a kiss to her forehead, and when she returned to the living room, Min-jae was exactly where she'd left him, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking with silent emotion. She knelt beside him again, pulled his hands away, and kissed him like a promise she intended to keep forever. 5 years later, Sandra stood at the penthouse windows, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over the skyline. Her reflection stared back older now, laugh lines at her eyes, a diamond ring catching the fading light. Behind her, Lily's laughter echoed from her bedroom. "You're thinking too loud again." Sandra smiled without turning. Min-jae's wheelchair rolled up beside her, and his hand found hers with the easy familiarity of years. "Just remembering," she said softly. "The restaurant?" He knew her too well. The empty chair. "How broken you looked." Sandra squeezed his hand. "How broken I was." Min-jae was quiet, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The blood oath had been restructured, stabilized, its leadership undisputed after Park Min-ho's organization had been dismantled. Some nights Sandra still woke remembering those 3 days Min-jae had disappeared to handle the threat, but he'd come back. He always came back. I was drowning, Min-jae said finally. The paralysis, the pity, the loneliness. I'd convinced myself I was already dead, just hadn't stopped breathing yet. And then Lily asked why you looked so sad. And then Lily asked why I looked so sad, he echoed, smiling. This fearless child who saw straight through everything I'd built to protect myself. Sandra crouched down so they were eye level. Even after everything, she still saw both versions of him, the ruthless leader who commanded an empire, and the man who'd defended her honor, who'd protected her daughter, who'd been terrified she'd say no when he proposed. You saved us, Sandra said. The medical bills, the job, the protection. No. Min-jae's hand cupped her face. You saved me first. You and Lily. You looked at me like I was still a person worth knowing. Like the wheelchair was just a chair, not a prison sentence. His voice roughened. You gave me a reason to keep fighting when I'd forgotten why I was alive. We saved each other, Sandra corrected gently. Mama! Min-jae! Lily's voice called from down the hall. She was 13 now, all gangly limbs and braces and fierce intelligence. She bounded into the room with her homework tablet. I need help with this history essay. She stopped, looking between them. Are you guys being mushy again? Min-jae laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Always. Come here. Lily rolled her eyes but leaned against Min-jae's wheelchair, and Sandra stood, wrapping her arms around both of them. This impossible, unconventional family they'd built from desperation, and something that had surprised them both by turning into love. Tell me something, Min-jae said to Lily. If you could go back and warn your 7-year-old self about anything, what would it be? Lily considered this seriously. I'd tell her that the sad man at the restaurant is going to become the best dad she could ask for, she grinned. Even if he does make me do extra math homework. Sandra watched Min-jae's face transform, the vulnerability, the love, the wonder that this was his life now. We were both so scared, Sandra murmured. We were both so broken, Min-jae agreed. And somehow, Lily added, you fixed each other. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances stood together, proof that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, sometimes from a child's innocent question, sometimes from a single moment of being truly seen, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, it comes wrapped in a second chance neither of you thought you'd get. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more emotional, unexpected love stories. Don't miss the next chapter in someone's second chance at happiness.